The morning of that Christmas began like any other, the hush before dawn, when the house seems wrapped in soft blankets of anticipation, and the only sound is the faint creak of floorboards awakening with the promise of festivity. I remember pushing aside the velvet drape that covered the living room window and breathing in the cold, pine-infused air that seeped in from the frost-kissed evergreen outside, that familiar, comforting scent of the holidays. But then there it was, an unexpected undercurrent of warm, savory aroma, like a carnival of spices drifting through the house, slicing through the pininess with irreverent boldness. I stopped for a moment, my breath hanging in the air, trying to place its origin. Turkey roasting, cinnamon wafting from baked pies, mulled cider blackberrying on the stove, yes, all of those were here in the Christmas symphony, but this new scent reminded me of summer fairs and roadside diners, of grease, slicked paper wrappers and sticky fingers reaching for golden drumsticks. My heart both leapt and tightened, caught off guard by the thought that Grandma, the matriarch whose kitchen was sacred ground for generations of our family's holiday traditions, had abandoned the turkey for fried chicken. The very idea felt like a small revolution, a playful rebellion against the staid, time-worn rituals we'd all taken for granted. I could almost hear the shock ripple across the dining room like a dropped Christmas bauble, see my cousins stiffen with curiosity, and imagine my parents exchanging glances equal parts amusement and alarm. As I padded down the hallway in my flannel pajamas, I passed the grandfather clock whose pendulum had counted out the seconds until Christmas since before I was born. Its hands hovered just before 8, a time when the whole household typically gathered for coffee and the unveiling of presents. But this year, the mood was different. Charged with the electricity of the unknown, from the kitchen came the soft clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation, punctuated by bursts of laughter that sounded too light-hearted for a morning dedicated to holy solemnity and family reverence. Something was undeniably at stake. I rounded the corner and there it was, a long, gleaming silver platter covered by a dome so perfectly polished it reflected the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree behind me, each colorful orb dancing across the metal like tiny spirits of joy. Grandma stood beside it, her eyes alight with mischief, her hands poised as if she were about to perform a magic trick rather than serve a holiday meal. The table around her was laid out with all the usual suspects: mashed potatoes whipped to buttery peaks, glossy cranberry sauce that caught the morning light, green beans that had wilted into tender ribbons, but the centerpiece was this rogue platter. I felt a shiver of anticipation ripple through me, as if I were witnessing a cosmic shift in the universe of our traditions. Before anyone could speak, Grandma lifted the dome. A chorus of gasps rose like a sudden wind as the platter's contents were revealed: golden brown chicken pieces so perfectly fried that each one gleamed as if glazed in amber, steam coiling lazily upward and carrying with it that heady aroma I'd smelled in the corridor. Thighs, drumsticks, wings arranged in a glorious huddle, crowned with sprigs of rosemary for a festive flourish. The sight was both absurd and beautiful, like a dream in which two contradictory worlds had collided, the old-world charm of Christmas with the down-home, no-nonsense hospitality of Southern comfort food. My mind raced, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with every Christmas past I'd ever known. I watched my family's faces in that moment: my mother's delicate gasp, eyebrows knitting together in confusion, my uncle's brow furrowing as he tried to process this culinary curveball, my little cousins jostling for position with the unguarded enthusiasm of children who demand novelty on their holidays. Even my usually stoic father cracked a reluctant smile, as though he recognized the delicious defiance in each crisp-edged piece. And there I stood, rooted to the spot, a silent witness to the birth of a new holiday myth. In the usual chronology of Christmas, turkey and ham were sovereigns, reigning supreme on the festive table. Here, however, was a challenger, a lightning rod of delight that threatened to upend every expectation. But why had Grandma done it? The question burned in my mind with the intensity of a holiday candle's flame. Was this a confession of secret cravings she'd harbored for years? A playful wink at a past she'd never told us about? A statement on how traditions evolve when generations collide? I glanced at her face, looking for a clue in the faint wrinkles around her eyes, the slight curl of her lips. She met my gaze and winked, as if to say, "Patience, dear." And in that single gesture she sowed the seeds of a mystery I couldn't wait to unravel. As I reached for my coat to investigate the origins of that tray, I realized that this morning was already a tapestry woven of old and new threads, a reminder that family lore is a living thing, capable of transformation when we least expect it. The smell of fried chicken on Christmas morning was more than a quirky anecdote. It was an invitation to question why we cling so fiercely to certain rituals, to ask what hidden stories lie beneath the surface of our collective memories. I felt a flutter of excitement, as if I were at the threshold of an adventure that would tease out laughter and tears in equal measure, a journey that might forever change my idea of what a holiday feast could be. And so, with a mix of reverence and playful curiosity, I stepped closer to that platter, ready to taste more than just crispy skin and juicy meat. I was ready to sink my teeth into the rich, tangled narrative of my own family. Little did I know that this simple act of sampling a piece of fried chicken under the twinkling lights of Christmas would spark stories of long-lost college days, interstate road trips, sibling rivalries sparked by extra gravy boats, and lessons about embracing the unexpected. The silence in the room became electric with anticipation, hearts hungering for revelation as eagerly as for the meal itself. In that charged space between tradition and surprise, I caught my breath, bracing for the first crunch that would shatter the ice of convention and set loose a flood of memories I had never imagined. And so, with fingers tingling and senses alight, I raised that chicken drumstick to my lips, unaware that one single bite was about to rewrite the holiday playbook for everyone at the table and, perhaps, for me, forever transforming the way I saw Christmas mornings. Dear viewer, please check if you are still subscribed to the channel. Sometimes, subscriptions can be cancelled automatically, so it's always good to verify. Take this opportunity to become a channel member. As a member, you'll enjoy amazing benefits, like watching our content without ads. Additionally, you can support our work by becoming a channel sponsor with a thank you. Your help allows us to invest in better tools and elevate the quality of our content production. Join us on this journey and be part of our community. And tell us in the comments below from which city you are listening to this story and what time it is there now. The silence that fell over us was so complete it felt as if the world itself had stopped breathing, save for that intoxicating aroma curling through the air, a warm tide of fried chicken perfume that crashed into the traditional pine and cinnamon symphony of Christmas morning. I could hear my own heart thumping in my ears, the usual chatter of our family gatherings momentarily hushed under the weight of collective astonishment. The golden haze floating above Grandma's covered platter seemed to glow in the soft morning light, each wisp of steam carrying with it the promise of something familiar yet utterly foreign. In that suspended instant, faces turned inward, noses flared, and eyes gleamed with a dozen unspoken questions. How did fried chicken commandeer our holiday table? What secret accord had been struck under the cover of that gleaming dome? And more importantly, were we ready to let centuries of Christmas custom yield to a bucket of crispy wings? I remembered how, as a child, I had learned to gauge the excitement of Christmas morning by the strength of the turkey's aroma drifting from the kitchen. It was a ritual as sturdy as the old grandfather clock ticking down the minutes to 8 o'clock, as dependable as Grandma's lace-edged tablecloth that flattened itself over 6 generations of spills and stories. But this perfume, this raucous blend of paprika, garlic powder, and frying oil shattered every expectation I had ever held. My aunt, usually the first to dive into anecdotes about childhood pranks, sat frozen halfway through a grin. My cousins, who moments earlier had been jostling over who'd get the biggest gift box, suddenly stood stock still, hands inches from wrapping paper and bows. The hush draped over the room like a silk sheet, heavy enough to drape around our shoulders and remind us that we were witnessing a fissure in the very bedrock of our holiday traditions. I shifted on the hardwood floor, my flannel pajamas rustling, and swallowed the lump of shock rising in my throat. Grandma's eyes shone with impish delight as she waited for the collective gasp to subside. She toyed with the edge of the platter's dome, spinning it like a roulette wheel that teetered on the brink of revelation. In that moment, I felt the years of family lore gathering and untangling themselves inside me, memories of huddling around crackling fireplaces, of cranberry sauce that glistened like rubies, of carols sung in curious harmony by voices both tuneful and off-key. Yet here we were, suspended between two worlds, the stately lineage of Christmas dinners past and this audacious new guest that dared to rewrite our holiday script. A flicker of movement drew my gaze to my mother. Her delicate features, usually composed with the serene confidence of the family's emotional anchor, were marked now by a flicker of doubt. Her eyes darted to my father, whose usual stoicism cracked into an almost conspiratorial smile, the kind that lets you know he, too, was torn between bewilderment and amusement. Meanwhile, Uncle Rob, our resident skeptic, leaned forward, head cocked, as if expecting the chicken to sprout wings and confess its origin story. Even the cousins, whose primary concerns revolved around video games and smartphones, had abandoned their devices in favor of this mysterious centerpiece. The room crackled with a tension so thick it shimmered above the table, as though each breadcrumb on that platter carried the weight of our collective curiosity. I found myself tracing patterns on the polished wood floor, trying to pinpoint the moment when the smell had first wormed its way into my awareness. It had snuck past the cranberry's tart sweetness, sidestepped the buttery warmth of mashed potatoes, and cut straight through the festive scents we'd come to rely on. It was a trail of breadcrumbs leading not to a story of holiday tradition, but to a chapter of Grandma's life none of us had fully known, the one she'd lived when the world outside her family's embrace beckoned with new flavors, vibrant cultures, and the restless energy of youth. The more I inhaled, the more I sensed that behind each crisp-edged wing lay a tale of rebellion and reinvention, of summer nights spent under diner neon, of dreams that refused to be confined by the velvet ribbons of routine. Voices began to climb out of the hush in soft murmurs. "Is she trying to tell us something?" whispered my aunt, eyes narrowing. Or did someone order KFC at dawn? My cousin speculated, a half-smile dancing on her lips. Laughter bubbled hesitantly, then dissipated as quickly as it had emerged, replaced by another wave of silence that seemed to pulse in time with my racing pulse. I realized that every one of us was grappling with the same question: would we welcome this unexpected guest into our collective memory, or would we recoil, holding tight to the scripts handed down through generations? The aroma itself seemed to demand an answer, to force us to choose whether to condemn it as sacrilege or to accept it as an evolution of something we held dear. Grandma cleared her throat, a small, deliberate sound that snapped our focus back to her. She lifted one perfectly fried drumstick, fingertips grazing the rosemary sprig perched on the pile like a festive ornament. The steam rose in lazy curls, carrying with it the promise of something beyond mere taste, a conversation, a confession, a bridge between who she'd once been and the matriarch we knew today. Her lips curved in that familiar half-smile, the one that heralded a story lurking just beyond the rim of her eyes. "I'll tell you about this in a moment," she said, voice warm as simmering broth. "First, I want you to smell it. Really smell it." We leaned in, drawn by a mix of respect and insatiable curiosity. The hush returned, this time charged with anticipation rather than shock. Inhaling deeply, I felt memories and questions swirl together, of childhood wonder, of the flickering hope that Christmas can hold surprises, of the ways in which a single scent can unlock doors to hidden rooms in our hearts. The air around us vibrated, as if acknowledging that this moment would become one we'd retell at every gathering to come, the Christmas when fried chicken claimed its place alongside turkey on our holiday table. And yet, before anyone dared to taste or speak another word, the unmistakable chime of the doorbell rang out, shattering the stillness once more. Every head jerked toward the entryway, as if expecting a courier bearing yet another culinary curveball, or perhaps a family secret long buried under layers of holiday tinsel. The sound echoed down the hallway, its bright note hanging in the air like a question mark. We exchanged glances, breath caught in our chests, the platter's steam now mingling with the charged hush of possibility. In that single, electric moment, I realized that the smell which had broken our silence was only the first crack in a story that would redefine everything we thought we knew about family, tradition, and the simple act of sharing a meal. While the doorbell's echo still lingered in the hallway, debate erupted around the table faster than gravy over piping hot mashed potatoes. My cousin Jenna, ever the conspiracy theorist, shot her hand into the air and half-whispered, "She can't possibly have cooked all that chicken by hand before sunrise." Across from her, Uncle Rob narrowed his eyes, folding his arms as though daring anyone to challenge his expertise. "This isn't homemade," he declared, voice low and certain. "Nobody but a fast food joint can fry chicken this uniformly golden. Look at those edges, too perfect." His tone carried the smug satisfaction of someone who'd solved the world's greatest mysteries before breakfast. Mom's fork hovered midair, coated in sweet cranberry sauce, as she exchanged a single glance with Dad. They'd built a reputation for diplomacy in family spats, her gentle nod to him, his subtle shrug in return. Yet even they seemed torn. Part of them yearned for the comfort of Grandma's meticulous, time-stained recipes, another part of them looked at that platter and felt the thrill of culinary rebellion. I watched their eyes flick between the chicken and each other, feeling the weight of their unspoken question, tradition or temptation. The younger cousins, oblivious to the subtleties of family politics, dove headfirst into the debate. My brother Alex barked with the confidence of a seasoned debater, "She's got a secret recipe. Remember that orange glaze she used on the ham last year? She's been tinkering with spices since before you were born, Jenna." He punctuated his theory with a dramatic flourish of his napkin, as if sealing the argument with a kiss. Jenna rolled her eyes so hard I thought I'd hear them click, but Alex's bravado held firm. "Trust me, I've seen her scribble in those recipe books notes in the margins, smudges of paprika. She's proudest of her special fried chicken." But Jenna, ever the skeptic, snapped back, "Sure, but if she had that many drumsticks lined up at 6 a.m., why would she hide in the kitchen like a spy? Grandma's all about fanfare. She'd want us watching every step, breathing in the aroma as it bubbled in the skillet." Her words hung heavy in the air, each syllable dipping the scales further toward the possibility that a drive-through bag lurked beneath the polished lid. I realized then how often our family had equated effort with affection. Turkey meant hours of basting, ham required perfect glazing, yams demanded a fragile balance of sweetness and spice. It wasn't just food, it was proof of love, a tangible metric of devotion. To suspect Grandma of ordering KFC felt like questioning her very heart. And yet, the crisp edges of each wing suggested a precision fryer no cozy kitchen stove could match. As the chatter grew louder, Grandma herself finally stepped forward, her silhouette framed by the tree's twinkling lights. She brushed a stray curl from her temple and offered that mischievous half-smile we all recognized, the one that promised both revelation and misdirection. "Calm yourselves," she said, voice warm and steady, like a hearth settling after a crackle. "I have an explanation. But first, let's eat." Her invitation fell between us like a soft landing. Plates were filled again, heaping portions of chicken, mashed potatoes, coleslaw dolloped beside, but the air was thick with anticipation. Every bite carried the weight of an unanswered question: was this crafted by loving hands or mass-produced? I closed my eyes as I bit into a wing, letting the crunch resonate through my senses. The skin fractured like thin glass, a symphony of salt and pepper in my mouth, and for a fleeting moment, all doubt vanished. This was comfort incarnate. Yet when I reached for a second piece, that nagging curiosity tugged at me, demanding more than flavor, it demanded truth. Between mouthfuls of creamy coleslaw, Aunt Clara cleared her throat and leaned closer, lowering her voice. You know, I asked Grandma on the phone days ago if she needed help prepping the turkey. She said everything was under control, and then told me not to worry about a thing. I thought she was talking turkey literally. But now, she trailed off, her eyes twinkling with the hint of a family secret. The notion that we'd been spoken to in half-truths added another layer to the mystery. Dad set down his fork and folded his napkin methodically, as though bracing himself for a grand unveiling. All right, spill it, Grandma, he said, half laughing. Is this your own recipe, developed over decades, or did you swing by the kernels on your way here? Grandma let out a soft chuckle that seemed to soften the edges of the debate. Well, she began, wiping her hands on her apron, it's a bit of both. A collective murmur rippled around the table. Both? Alex's eyes lit up, Jenna's eyebrows shot skyward. Grandma continued, during my college years, I worked at a diner in Nashville, yes, the Nashville where I learned the art of seasoning and frying chicken. I fell in love with those recipes, and I practiced them every chance I got. But last week, when I set out to make my special Christmas chicken, I realized I'd misplaced my old recipe cards. They vanished poof just like that. She spread her hands as though framing a magic trick. So instead of panicking, I made a quick call to my old friend Bobby, who still owns a franchise outside the city. He said, Grandma, let me help you out. I'll send a batch fresh from our kitchen at dawn. A hush descended as we processed her confession. It was at once a relief and a shock, the perfect fusion of homemade lore and fast food practicality. My heart eased knowing we hadn't been hoodwinked by a drive-through bag, but part of me mourned the disappearance of Grandma's secret recipe, the one we'd never actually tasted. A tender nostalgia settled in my chest for the lost notes, the faded handwriting on yellowed cards, the smell of frying oil mixed with her lilac perfume. Uncle Rob leaned forward, wagging a finger like a professor imparting a crucial lesson. So you outsourced Christmas dinner, he teased, but there was no malice in his tone. I guess even matriarchs need a little help sometimes. Grandma patted his hand affectionately. Yes, dear, even I know my limits. Traditions evolve. In that moment, I saw how this compromise mirrored larger truths about our family. We'd grown from a clan of rigid holiday purists into something more flexible, open to change, willing to blend old customs with new conveniences. Grandparents who once insisted on homemade everything had begun using store-bought pies. Uncles who scoffed at electric carolers now streamed playlists. Our collective values had shifted subtly, as imperceptibly as yeast under dough, until even Grandma's kitchen was ready to welcome a little outside help. Just as the conversation seemed to settle into reflective calm, Jenna piped up with characteristic bluntness. But Grandma, don't you think the real tradition was about cooking it yourself? I mean, isn't the point of our Christmas feast that we share the labor as well as the meal? Her question hung in the air, sincere and probing. Grandma's gaze softened. Sweetheart, she replied, tradition isn't the act of cooking alone. It's the act of sharing stories, sharing laughter, sharing the unexpected. This platter is a story in itself, a reminder that family isn't about perfection but about coming together, even when things aren't exactly the way they were before. Her answer struck a chord deeper than any drumstick could. Suddenly, the debate about origin seemed trivial compared to the unspoken understanding blossoming around the table. We weren't just sharing fried chicken, we were sharing a moment of growth, a pivot point in our collective history. The clatter of cutlery slowed as each of us savored not just the food, but the meaning behind it. And yet, as the last tendrils of steam curled above the silver dome, another question took shape in my mind, one that reached beyond recipes and franchises, beyond inherited cards and fast food runs. The doorbell had rung again, twice this time, as if insisting on an encore performance. Who could it be, arriving at this hour of revelation? Was it Bobby with a fresh batch to seal Grandma's story? A neighbor bearing gifts of peace or pastries? Or perhaps a voice from Grandma's past, eager to fill in the missing pages of her Nashville years? Before anyone could speak, Grandma rose gracefully, smoothing her apron with deliberate calm. You'll have to excuse me for a moment, she said, her eyes twinkling with that same mischievous light. I'll just see who's at the door. As she slipped away, the family's chatter resumed with new vigor, questions about the visitor, hopes for another twist in the tale, and a buzzing undercurrent of excitement that matched the first crackle of the kitchen timers. We all leaned forward, forks forgotten, as her footsteps receded down the hallway. In the space she left behind, the fried chicken, once the center of a conspiracy, now felt like a bridge between what was and what could be. And as we exchanged glances, the echoes of our laughter and the scent of rosemary-crowned chicken intertwined, promising that the next chapter of this Christmas story was already unfolding, one unexpected ring at a time. I glanced down at the drumstick in my hand, its golden crust still steaming in the cold morning light, and felt my pulse quicken. The room had fallen into a hush so profound it felt like time itself had paused, letting the aroma of frying spices hang heavy in the air. My fingers tingled at the thought of that first bite, an act so simple, yet charged with the potential to upend every assumption I'd ever held about Christmas, family, and the rituals we cling to. I brought the chicken to my nose, inhaling deep. The scent was intoxicating, a heady blend of paprika's warmth, garlic's gentle bite, and a whisper of rosemary that spoke of pine-scented wreaths. It was both utterly foreign and deeply familiar, like stumbling on a long-lost piece of yourself in a stranger's attic. As I raised the drumstick to my lips, I felt a curious mix of reverence and rebellion. In one hand, I held the weight of every holiday past, the carefully basted turkeys, the gleaming hams, the perfect lattice of sugar-glazed fruitcakes. In the other, I held this improbable token of Grandma's youthful escapades, an emblem of spontaneity that threatened to rewrite our family's script. My heart thrummed with the tension of that dichotomy, tradition versus discovery, comfort versus adventure. For a fraction of a second, I hesitated, as though the membrane between certainty and possibility might tear should I proceed. Then I bit down. The crunch echoed through the quiet dining room like a pistol shot, shards of crust fracturing in a symphony of crisp rebellion. Juices burst free, warm and succulent, flooding my senses with a richness I'd never associated with Christmas morning. It tasted of summer nights spent under neon diner signs, of grease-slicked paper wrappings and laughter echoing off Formica countertops. Yet the faintest notes of clove and star anise, a secret flourish from Grandma's memory, wove through the meat, anchoring it firmly in the holiday world I thought I knew. My eyes fluttered shut as the flavors crashed together, the savory heat of the spices, the cool sweetness of the creamy coleslaw a fork's distance away, the earthy tang of rosemary lingering like a festive whisper. Around me, the hush deepened. My mother had paused mid-chew, that gentle curve of her mouth frozen in contemplation. My father's usually impassive gaze softened as he watched me taste, his head tilting slightly, as if he, too, were tasting through me. Cousins leaned forward on the table, forks poised in midair, eyes darting between my expression and their own plates. Even Uncle Rob, the skeptic, had settled back into his chair, arms uncrossed now, as though surrendering to the moment. In that charged silence, every heartbeat felt amplified, every breath a promise of revelation. I could almost hear the click of Grandma's recipe cards flipping open in my mind, pages fluttering to reveal recipes long hidden beneath dust and time. The second bite was bolder, more deliberate. I broke off a wing tip and held it up to the light, inspecting the delicate lacework of batter that cradled the tender meat. The texture was flawless, light enough to dissolve on the tongue, sturdy enough to bear the weight of 1,000 memories. As I chewed, my mind drifted back to simpler Christmases, the holiday when I was 6 and smeared cranberry sauce across my face in a fit of gleeful mischief, the year my brother staged a turkey escape that ended with feathers down his pajama shirt, the winter we forgot to thaw the ham and ended up ordering pizza out of sheer desperation. In each recall, the smell and taste of traditional fare had anchored me, a lodestar guiding every holiday gathering. But now, tasting this chicken, I felt an unexpected shift, like discovering a new star in a sky I thought I'd charted completely. A memory surfaced of Grandma herself, decades younger, apron tied at her waist, flipping chicken in a roadside diner's fryer as country music crackled overhead. I could almost hear the distant guitar strums from the jukebox, smell the fryer oil mingling with the tang of ketchup bottles at every booth. That image flickered to life in my mind's eye, inviting me to see her not just as the matriarch who presided over lace tablecloths and embroidered napkins, but as a woman who had once chased dreams beyond our family's oak-paneled parlor. The realization was thrilling. In this crispy morsel lay the essence of her hidden story, a testament to a life lived in full brightness before she settled into the gentle glow of grandmotherhood. I swallowed and looked up, catching Grandma's reflection in the shining dome of the platter. She stood at the doorway, half turned toward the hallway where the doorbell had chimed moments ago. Her profile was backlit by the soft glow of the entryway light, her posture relaxed yet poised, as though she knew that every second of suspense heightened the significance of what we were tasting. A mischievous smile played at the corner of her lips, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her patience waiting until we'd untangled the mystery of the chicken's flavor before unveiling the next act in her story. The taste lingered on my tongue, savory, sweet, spiced, herbal, nostalgic, novel. It was a paradox embodied in food form, a reminder that memories aren't static, they evolve, fold over themselves, and sometimes emerge in unexpected flavors. As I reached for a third piece, a hush fell again, this one filled not with doubt but with anticipation. The moment felt sacred, like the final notes of a carol hanging in the air just before midnight. We were all poised, ready to embrace whatever revelation lay behind the door that Grandma had gone to answer. A soft click echoed down the hallway, followed by muffled voices, a man's deep baritone and Grandma's lighter, lilting reply. The guests she'd invited into this unfolding drama were finally arriving, drawn by the promise of more than just holiday fare. My heart fluttered, the story was far from over. Each footstep on the wooden floorboard seemed to beat in time with my own, reminding me that anticipation is its own kind of feast, one we all shared in that moment, united by curiosity and the unexpected joy a single bite can ignite. I glanced around the table and saw in each face a reflection of my own wonder. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears, partly from the richness of the flavor, partly from the recognition that traditions can grow and change without losing their heart. My father's lips curved in a knowing smile, the kind that says, "I always knew there was more to this story." Even the youngest cousins, who earlier had eyed their smartphones, now leaned forward, as intent on the human tale as they were on the meal. We were all poised on the brink of a new chapter, one that Grandma had authored with flour, oil, spice, and the generosity of spirit that transforms mere sustenance into memory. Footsteps drew nearer, and Grandma's figure appeared again, silhouetted against the glow of the front hall. In one hand she held the platter's dome, now empty save for a lone rosemary sprig, a symbolic flourish that spoke of endings and beginnings entwined. In her other hand, she carried a tall, slender box wrapped in unassuming brown paper and tied with twine. My pulse quickened. The box looked too small for another culinary surprise. It felt more like a messenger, an artifact promising to illuminate the path that had led Grandma from that Nashville diner to our holiday table this morning. She paused in the threshold, her eyes sweeping over the expectant faces, her smile widening into something both affectionate and conspiratorial. "I think it's time you all met the final ingredient in this recipe," she said, voice warm as melted butter, "the one that completes the circle." She lifted the box, and silence fell so completely that I thought I could hear the drumstick crackling in my hand, still offering echoes of the first bite. Then she set the box down on the table, its edges catching the light like the cover of an unopened chapter. We leaned in, breathless, united by the trust that Grandma had earned over 6 decades of holiday legends. The box seemed to hum with possibility, as though it held not just a physical object but a bridge between the past and the future of our family. I looked at the box, then at Grandma, then back at the platter dome now resting beside it, empty, yet full of implication. And in that suspended moment, I realized that this Christmas morning had already changed me, realigned my sense of what traditions could be, and opened my heart to the beauty of the unexpected. The front door creaked softly, as if the house itself was leaning in to catch every detail. Grandma took a breath, her eyes shining with the same mischief and warmth that had guided me to this very taste of transformation. "Go on," she whispered, nodding at the box, "open it." We obeyed, hands trembling with excitement, each of us eager to uncover the secret that lay within and to taste, once more, the way a single surprise can redefine everything we thought we knew about home. We gathered around the table, the slender box now sitting between the empty platter dome and a scattering of rosemary sprigs. Grandma's fingers trembled with an excitement I'd never seen before as she untied the twine and peeled back the brown paper. Inside lay a slim, worn leather journal, its edges frayed, tied shut with a faded ribbon, a keepsake from a life none of us had truly known. Beneath it, carefully folded, were sepia-toned photographs, a fresh-faced young woman in a crisp diner uniform, neon lights dancing behind her, a crowded Formica counter in Nashville, where she stood at the fryer, hair pinned back, arms dusted in flour and spices, and a Christmas card she'd sent home one season, ink smudged by tears of homesickness. The room fell into an odd hush, broken only by the distant tick of the grandfather clock and the lingering scent of rosemary and fried chicken, as if those aromatic memories themselves were pressing us to pay attention. Grandma cleared her throat, voice both soft and electric. "This," she said, lifting the little journal like a treasure chest, "is where it all began." She flipped open the cover to reveal a page crowded with chicken-spattered notes in her elegant script, measurements of buttermilk, scribbled temperature adjustments, a sketch of the perfect drumstick shape. The very first entry was dated December 1965, Christmas Eve, though it stood out that the margin bore a tiny star beside its date. She told us how, as a 19-year-old from a small Brazilian town, she'd landed in Nashville with a scholarship for music school but no place to stay. The only job she could find was at Ruby's Diner on Fifth Avenue, where the griddle sizzled round the clock and the jukebox crooned country love songs into the early hours. She had arrived in America dreaming of stage lights and guitars, but instead found herself wrestling heavy buckets of fryer oil and learning the art of Southern hospitality one battered piece at a time. As she spoke, I could almost smell the mix of pigments she described, the tang of vinegar-rich coleslaw mingling with the sweetness of pecan-smoked ham wafting down the steam table, the clinking of coffee cups and the murmur of late-night regulars who treated her like kin. She remembered that Christmas of '65 was her first away from home, and how she'd crushed a handful of pine needles into the breading mix, an impulsive nod to the fir trees of her childhood Brazil, where Christmas meant green forests and church bells, not neon signs and diner stools. That experiment had filled the diner with a piney warmth she'd never forgotten, merging two worlds in a single bite. The idea lingered dormant in her heart until this Christmas morning, when she decided to share that hidden chapter with us all. My mother reached over to touch one of the photographs, Grandma in her blue-striped apron, hair tied in a kerchief, a broad smile as she flicked a spatula. Tears gathered at my mother's eyelashes. "I never knew," she whispered, "that you seasoned your life with a bit of home in every recipe." My father, usually composed, nodded slowly, as if apologizing to Grandma for never asking. The cousins leaned in, elbows on the table, eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. Even Uncle Rob, always the skeptic, exhaled a soft chuckle that sounded more like wonder. We realized that for decades, we had reduced Grandma's holiday magic to fairy dust and flourishes of whipped cream, without ever glimpsing the gritty determination that had shaped her. Here was proof that the woman who presided over our Christmas feasts had once been a fearless dreamer, frying chicken at dawn in a place far from everything she knew. Flipping through the journal, Grandma paused at a letter dated January 2, 1966. It was addressed to her mother in Brazil, penned in Portuguese with splashes of grease and a faint coffee ring. We passed it around, reading translations aloud, how she missed the sound of church choirs, how she'd learned the language of frying and found comfort in the steady hum of the fryer's bubbles, how she'd met a musician named Bobby who taught her to play steel guitar between shifts. The letter spoke of longing and excitement, in equal measure the ache of distance from family tempered by the thrill of discovering a new self in a diner's glow. My brother traced the faded ink with reverence, as if he were touching a relic. It struck me that the chicken we'd eaten carried not only her spices but also her bravado, her thirst for adventure. I looked up to see Grandma's eyes shining with a mix of pride and vulnerability. She confessed she'd tucked the journal away for years, afraid that revealing her wild youth might shatter the matriarchal image we cherished. But this morning, she'd realized that sometimes the strongest gifts come wrapped in personal truth. That plate of fried chicken was her way of saying, "I am more than the keeper of recipes, I am a storyteller." And in that moment, the crispy drumstick ceased to be merely dinner, it became a portal to a chapter of her life none of us had tasted until now. Laughter bubbled up as we remembered our own moments of reinvention, my cousin's brief punk rock phase, my mother's clandestine road trip in college, my uncle's year studying abroad in Beijing. We marveled at how each generation carried its own seasoning of risk and reinvention, blending flavors of past and present. Grandma smiled, seeing her legacy take root in our stories. She closed the journal and handed it to me. "Keep this," she said, "so you remember that tradition isn't fixed, it grows new branches over time." The words felt like a benediction, inviting us to honor the past but also to write our own future chapters, unexpected as they might be. As the morning sun streamed through the windows, catching flecks of rosemary on the table, I sensed a subtle shift in our family's atmosphere. We were no longer mere participants in a holiday ritual, we had become collaborators in an evolving tradition. The chicken stand, once a rebellious surprise, had revealed itself as a symbol of Grandma's youthful courage, of the fusion between two cultures, and of the idea that home is more than a place, it's a story we tell across generations. Plates emptied, but our hearts felt full, enriched by a shared understanding deeper than any glaze or gravy. Just as we began to settle, savoring the lingering aromas and the warmth of newly unearthed memories, a soft knock sounded at the front door. It wasn't the insistent chime of the doorbell this time, but a gentle rap that felt almost ceremonial. Grandma exchanged a glance with my father, an unspoken cue that the next surprise was on the way. We paused, breath catching again, as if the house itself held its breath. The journal lay open on the table, its pages fluttering in a whisper of anticipation, and beyond the door waited someone or something that promised to peel back yet another layer of this Christmas tale. The soft rap at the door sent a ripple of excitement through the room, as if the very walls leaned in to catch the next beat of our unfolding story. My cousin stilled mid-laughter, forks suspended over plates dusted with freckles of rosemary and stray crumbs of crispy coating. Grandma's eyes danced with anticipation, that familiar spark of mischief lighting the lines at the corner of her mouth. My father exchanged a quick, amused glance with my mother, who brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear while trying and failing to stifle a grin. Even Uncle Rob, ever the skeptic, straightened as if bracing for another curveball in this holiday feast. I rose from my chair, sleeves rolled up, and crossed the polished wood floor toward the door. Each step felt heavier with possibility, as though the air itself swelled with unspoken stories. When I turned the knob, there he stood, Bobby, Grandma's Nashville friend, wearing a red apron splattered with flour and grease and cradling a towering stack of tin buckets. His face, weathered yet open, broke into a broad grin that mirrored Grandma's own. Behind him, soft light from the hallway pooled onto the welcome mat, casting his silhouette in theatrical relief. "Merry Christmas," he boomed, his southern drawl carrying through the threshold like a warm breeze. He tipped his head, and a wisp of white mustache quivered as he chuckled. "Heard you might need a little extra sauce." He stepped inside, arms laden with buckets of gravy, coleslaw, and sauces of every hue, honey mustard that caught the light like spun gold, a tangy vinegar-based dip that promised to cut through any richness, and a smoky, molasses-dark barbecue sauce thick enough to coat the spoon in one indulgent swoop. As he set them down on the table, the room filled with the mingled scents of vinegar, brown sugar, and smoky peppers. Laughter bubbled up again as Bobby caught sight of the empty platter dome, now ornamented only by a few stray rosemary needles. "Y'all demolished this faster than a twister over a tin roof," he teased, eyes twinkling. "Thought I'd better bring reinforcements." Grandma enveloped him in a quick, conspiratorial hug, her arms strong despite her years. "You sure did, Bobby," she whispered, pressing her cheek against his shoulder. "I couldn't have pulled this off without you." Then, stepping back, she addressed us all with a theatrical flourish of her hand. "Friends, this is the man behind the magic, my sous chef in arms." A round of applause, gentle, affectionate, broke out, mingling with the clink of cutlery as those of us still mid-meal scooped up new helpings. I poured gravy over my mashed potatoes, watching it cascade in a silky waterfall, and drizzled honey mustard over a fresh drumstick, stirring the sweet and savory until each bite felt like a miniature celebration. As we settled back around the table, Bobby leaned in, wiping his hands on the hem of his apron. "I've got stories," he said, eyes roving the familiar faces. "But first, let's get some extra sauce on that chicken, shall we?" With childlike relish, my little cousins dove in, spoons scraping the bottoms of buckets, faces lighting up with each tangy, sweet, spicy swipe. My mother dabbed a drop of barbecue sauce at her lower lip and laughed a full, uninhibited laugh that sent warmth pulsing through my chest. My father, tucking his napkin into his collar, offered an appreciative nod to Bobby. Life was too short for dry chicken, he seemed to say. Over the hum of conversation and the gentle clatter of dishes, Bobby began to spin a yarn. He told us about the diner's Christmas rush back in 1967, when a sleet storm cut power across half the state, and he and Grandma improvised by cooking chicken over a wood-fired grill behind the restaurant. "The smoke curled up like a signal flare to Santa himself," he said, voice rich with nostalgia, and folks lined up around the block for a taste of that makeshift feast. His words painted images of steaming platters heaped with crispy wings, of patrons singing carols in the dim glow of lanterns, voices carrying hope through the darkness. As he spoke, I could almost see the snow swirling outside that old diner window, hear the crackle of wood embers and feel the shared camaraderie that only hardship and good food can forge. Tears glistened on my aunt's cheeks as she dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. She choked out, "I never knew Grandma made chicken that way. It sounds magical." The room softened in response, as if honoring her sentiment. Uncle Rob reached over to squeeze her hand. "Magic," he echoed, voice thick with feeling. "That's exactly what family cooking is, pulling warmth from cold nights, turning scarcity into generosity." Grandma caught my eye and winked, the same gesture that had launched this entire adventure. I felt a lump in my throat as I realized the depth behind her playful surprise. She hadn't just brought fried chicken to our holidays, she'd brought a slice of resilience, of shared history that transcended borders and generations. Between bites, we traded memories of laughter and tears seasoned with extra sauce. My brother recalled the year he accidentally drenched the turkey in enough maple syrup to glue feathers to the table, while my cousins giggled over the time Aunt Clara tried to substitute sweet potato casserole with pumpkin pie. Chaos, sweetness, and laughter that still bound us together. Each anecdote felt amplified by Bobby's sauces, as though the condiments themselves held a mirror to our own need for forgiveness, for embracing imperfections. A stray drop of barbecue slipped from my spoon onto my sleeve, and I shrugged, savoring the thought that stains like stories were marks of a life lived fully, without fear of messing up. As the final tin bucket was scraped clean, Grandma raised her glass, a modest tumbler of spiced cider inviting a toast. "To family," she said, voice warm and clear. "To stories that bind us, to surprises that renew us, to flavors both old and new that remind us love isn't a rigid recipe but a living, breathing feast." We clinked glasses, cider swirling like liquid cinnamon, and the echo of that moment lingered against the windows, as if the house itself had exhaled. Then, just as we leaned back into comfortable contentment, the room fell into an expectant hush. Another knock sounded, this one soft but insistent, coming not from the front door but from the wall behind us, where a small service hatch led into the pantry. We all exchanged puzzled looks. Bobby straightened, wiping his hands on his apron once more. Didn't know anyone else was comin', he said, frowning good-naturedly. Grandma rose, smoothing her skirt, and said, "Well, I suppose our surprises aren't quite finished yet." I watched her move toward the pantry hatch, curiosity prickling along my spine. The table, still scattered with empty sauce buckets and half-finished chicken bones, felt charged with a new electricity. Was it another family member arriving late? A neighbor bearing sweets? Or perhaps a final twist in Grandma's carefully orchestrated holiday drama? The laughter and tears from our shared feast still echoed warmly, but now they mingled with a fresh note of suspense. As Grandma opened the hatch and called out, "Who's there?" the kitchen beyond seemed to hold its breath. The soft murmur of someone answering back drifted through, too faint to catch yet brimming with promise. I leaned forward, heart pounding, senses attuned to every rustle of parchment, every footstep on the linoleum floor. In that electric moment, I realized this Christmas was no longer about turkey or chicken, about old recipes or new twists. It was about the infinite ways a single meal could unfold into revelations, connections, surprises. And just as my hand twitched toward the hatch to help her, the latch clicked shut and silence enveloped us once more, ripe with possibility, leaving us hungering for the next bite of the story we'd only just begun to savor. Grandma paused at the pantry hatch, hand hovering over the latch as the hush settled back into the room. Her shoulders relaxed into a secretive curve, and she beckoned us forward with an almost mischievous nod. We gathered at the counter, plates abandoned halfway, forks poised in midair, as though afraid to break the spell. When she lifted the little door, it revealed Uncle John, our usually reserved cousin, apron tied high around his neck, cradling a roasting pan that steamed in gentle spirals. The pan held not more chicken but a perfectly golden turkey breast, crisp-skinned and herb-studded, as if it had sprouted there like an unexpected flower. He flashed a sheepish grin. "I thought you might need a bit of tradition," he said, voice rich with affection. Relief and delight rippled through us all. My mother let out a breath that sounded like laughter, my father cracked a wide grin, and even Uncle Rob's skeptical brow softened into a nod of approval. We formed a loose semicircle around Uncle John, passing the turkey pan from hand to hand, feeling its weight and warmth. The contrast between the fried chicken's fiery rebellion and this succulent nod to the past felt suddenly perfect, like two rhythms harmonizing into a richer melody. Grandma's eyes glistened as she sliced the turkey breast, revealing tender white meat veined with rosemary and thyme. Steam curled upward, fragrant as a church hymn and as cozy as my childhood memories of Christmas Day. As Uncle John carved, he explained how he discovered Granny's chicken coop by accident. Driving past a diner on his way home from an early shift, he'd smelled that unmistakable fried aroma and remembered Grandma's legendary curiosity. He swung in for a biscuit, only to find her old diner friend Bobby swapping stories over honey mustard. Inspired by their camaraderie, he dashed home at dawn to roast his own contribution, part apology for crashing Grandma's surprise, part embrace of shared tradition. Listening to him recount his hasty pre-dawn detour felt like witnessing a secret handshake between past and present, between turkey and chicken, between the stories we inherited and the ones we choose to write. We arranged the turkey beside the empty chicken platter, garnishing it with sprigs of thyme and a scattering of pomegranate seeds that glowed like rubies. The two centerpiece dishes, fried chicken and classic turkey, sat side by side, each inviting us to remember and to explore. Cousins clustered, dipping slices of turkey into Bobby's smoky barbecue sauce, marveling at how gravy and mustard and coleslaw could mingle on a single fork. My brother drizzled honey mustard over a turkey sliver, then popped a chicken wing into his mouth, eyes widening in comparative delight. Laughter erupted, warm and free, as we celebrated this unlikely duet on our holiday table. Between bites, Grandma lifted her glass, a modest tumbler of spiced cider, and called for a toast. "To the old and the new, to daring surprises and comforting truths," she said, her voice steady but glowing. "May our traditions always leave room for reinvention." The clink of glasses rang out, and in that crystal note I felt the culmination of all we'd tasted, the crispy defiance of fried chicken, the solemn grace of roasted turkey, the laughter and tears that had seasoned each layer of our shared memory. We murmured our agreement, eyes shining with the knowledge that we were part of something bigger than a single recipe. As the meal wound down, a curious calm settled over the table. Plates were scraped clean, napkins folded into shapes that echoed the day's peaks of excitement, and Bobby's sauce bucket sat empty as a testament to our appetite. We lingered over the remnants of rosemary sprigs and stray crumbs, reluctant to let the moment slip away. My mother reached across to squeeze Grandma's hand. Uncle John dabbed at his forehead with a smile, as if exhausted by the thrill of his own contribution. I realized then that we were participants in a living tradition, one that breathed and shifted with each generation's touch. Grandma leaned back in her chair, surveying the circle of faces she'd gathered. "You know," she began, voice soft, "we could do this again next year." The room listened as if she'd whispered a sacred incantation. We'll keep the turkey, keep the chicken, and maybe just maybe someone else will surprise us with another twist. A dish that carries your story, your own hidden chapter. That suggestion landed like a pebble in still water, sending ripples of possibility through our thoughts. Cousins glanced at one another, imaginations kindling, aunts candied yams with chili flakes, brothers experimental gingerbread dumplings, my own desperate urge to try a seafood ceviche infused with Christmas spices. The idea of co-creating a holiday menu, each of us contributing a dish that spoke of our own journeys, felt like a revolution. It wasn't about dethroning turkey or elevating chicken, it was about expanding the circle of what counted as tradition. Grandma tapped her finger on the table, as if marking the first line of a new recipe, and said, "Next year, let's each bring something unexpected, something that tells our story." My father raised an eyebrow playfully. "I vote for a rotating guest chef spot," he declared. "And maybe a prize for the quirkiest dish." Laughter rippled again, richer this time, layered with the warmth of shared ownership. When the last dish was cleared, and the glow of midday sun warmed the hardwood floors, we drifted toward the living room to unwrap gifts we'd set aside. But the energy lingered, the buzz of possibility, the memory of the smell of frying chicken colliding with the scent of roasting turkey, the echo of toasts raised to the unpredictable magic of family. On the mantel, the small leather journal sat open beside a lone rosemary sprig, as though waiting for new pages to be filled. I caught Grandma's eye and saw in her expression both contentment and anticipation, as if she, too, wondered what surprises lay ahead. Stepping back into the kitchen to gather our coats, I touched the journal's frayed cover and imagined next December, our table groaning with novelties rooted in each of our pasts, laughter rising over 100 different flavors, curiosity igniting new conversations. Traditions would no longer be inherited relics but living stories, each generation weaving its own bold thread. As I turned off the lights and let the house settle into a soft hush, I realized that what we'd experienced was more than a holiday feast, it was a blueprint for how families can transform memories into ever-evolving celebrations. And so, as the door clicked shut behind the final guest, our kitchen fell silent again, the mingled scents lingering like questions waiting to be answered. What odd dish will you bring to your own table next Christmas? What unexpected twist will breathe new life into your family's rituals? The answers, like all good surprises, wait just beyond the threshold, ready to rewrite your holiday story in the most delicious way. When the last guest finally drifted out into the golden afternoon light, and the kitchen fell into hush once more, I stood by the table where rosemary sprigs lay scattered like small green confetti, and the twin pillars of turkey and fried chicken, now just empty platters, seemed to whisper their parting benediction. In that quiet, the echo of laughter and the memory of shared glances hung in the air like a final verse of a favorite carol, lingering long after the notes have faded. I realized then that our family's holiday had been irreversibly altered, not by a change of menu alone, but by a willingness to trust and surprise and embrace the unexpected. The crackle of chicken skin against tooth, the tender white breast of turkey kissed by time, each bite had carried a lesson about what it means to honor the past while daring to write new lines in our collective story. I looked around the now emptied chairs and felt the weight of possibility settle softly on my shoulders. Traditions, those sturdy relics we cling to like lifelines, are not immutable monuments carved in stone. They are more like living tapestries, threads woven and rewoven each year by the hands that gather around a table. Sometimes those hands will pull in a new color, a fresh pattern that surprises even the most ardent keepers of custom. And it is in that gentle stretching of our habits, that tiny shiver of uncertainty mingled with excitement, that we discover the true spirit of togetherness. Our Christmas had become richer not because we discarded our turkey or elevated our chicken, but because we invited a story to the feast: Grandma's Nashville years, Uncle John's pre-dawn turkey rescue, Bobby's sauces, and each of our own culinary curiosities. As I cleared the last crumbs of coleslaw from the table, I thought of the people who might be watching this story unfold in their own homes. Perhaps you are nestled in a living room lit by twinkling lights, or perched alone at a small breakfast nook, craving a spark to kindle the warmth you've lost in routine. Maybe you remember the hush that fell over my kitchen when fried chicken tomahawked into our Christmas canon, and you feel a flicker of possibility. What if you, too, allowed something strange or daring to slip into your holiday script? Could you, this year, let that old jam recipe meet a dash of cumin? Could you invite the neighbor's exotic spice stew to stand between your roast ham and sweet potatoes? Could you set a place at your table not just for cousins and parents, but for a whole new idea? There is a certain magic in mixing the known with the unknown, the beloved with the surprising, because it tests our faith in one another. When Grandma asked us to trust her obscure flavors and midnight kitchen confidences, she was asking us to extend our love beyond familiarity into the realm of shared adventure. And as we bit into that first drumstick, we were not simply chewing food, we were tasting her courage, her youthful yearning, the very essence of a self she had tucked away for decades. Each bite became a bridge between her past and our present, a testament to the fact that the people we think we know best still hold secrets that can thrill us, amaze us, or sometimes even confuse us if only we allow ourselves to lean in, to sniff the air and ask, what new story might be hiding beneath this cover? What I learned that morning was that family is not a museum of perfect recollections but a workshop of living narratives, each person a storyteller in their own right. So I invite you, yes, you reading this right now, to become the next curator of your holiday wonder. Look over your grandmother's recipe box and see if a single index card is faded or out of place. Think of the dish you once cooked as a child that made you feel brave or mischievous. Consider the flavors you discovered on a trip long ago that still make your heart flutter when they drift from a vendor's stall. Bring one of these memories back to life. Dust off the mortar and pestle, or crank up the oven with a recipe you've never dared make in front of anyone else. Let your curiosity clash gently with your customs, and see what emerges. Let this Christmas be the year you declare open season on perfection. Release the burden of replicating every holiday exactly as it was before. Accept that some dishes will flop, some stories will fall flat, and that's precisely the point. Vulnerability breeds connection. When your stuffing spills onto the floor, laugh with your children as they chase rogue bread cubes. When your caramel sauce curdles, slide a smile across it and slide a scoop of ice cream on top anyway. Remember that the best feasts are not measured by seamless execution but by the way they unite us in shared triumphs and delicious disasters. And when you gather around your own table, whether heaving with a riot of dishes or modestly set with one brave new experiment, pause for a moment before the first fork lifts. Close your eyes and breathe in the mingled aromas, smoke and spice, sweet and savory, nostalgia and novelty. Let those fragrant notes stir memories of holidays past, yes, but also beckon you toward stories yet to be told. Watch the faces of your loved ones for that glint of curiosity, that spark of recognition when they realize you've invited them into a fresh chapter of your shared history. In that instant, you reaffirm something profound, that at the heart of every tradition lies not the ritual itself but the act of coming together to honor one another's lives, dreams, and hidden selves. By the time the last dish has been cleared and the fire in the hearth turns to embers, you will have woven another strand into your family's tapestry. You will have proven that tradition need not be a prison of repetition but a canvas for continual reinvention. And when children in the next generation ask, "Tell us about the year Grandma served fried chicken on Christmas morning," you will hand them the journal of your own holiday epic, a recipe card smudged with cumin and melted chocolate, a faded photograph of you in an apron too big, and a heart stitched full of laughter. So, this season, dare to break your own pine-scented silence with a bold new aroma. Slide a platter of the unexpected beneath your festive lights and watch the ripple of wonder break across familiar faces. Let the scent of curiosity permeate your home. And when the hush falls, invite them in with a conspiratorial smile. There's more to this story. Because the truth is, no matter how well we think we know our people, there is always a layer waiting to be peeled back, a recipe card, a photograph, a memory that has slipped behind the stove of our assumptions. All it takes is one fragrant nudge to set free the stories that whisper, just beneath the surface, "I'm here." This Christmas, may your table be both altar and laboratory, a sacred space where devotion to the past and daring for the future share each plate. May the clink of glasses not merely salute the year that was but toast the year yet to be written. And when the doorbell rings, whether it heralds another helping or a surprise guest, open it with eagerness and let the next twist fall into place. Embrace the flavor of uncertainty. Celebrate the imperfect. And above all, cherish the love that holds every peculiar, delicious moment together. Because at the end of the day, a family feast is not just a meal, it is the story we choose to tell, bite by bite, heart to heart, generation to generation.